Hello and welcome to another episode of the FemiNinja Project. And thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. And I have the most fascinating guest that we're talking to today. This guy is amazing. He's also very humble. His name is Terry Oliver, and he is a former police officer with over 28 years experience as a first responder who specializes in personal protection, a very important topic. He began his personal protection training over 4 decades ago and has studied and taught a number of realistic personal protection systems, which include verbal de-escalation strategies and personal protection skills. Terry has extensive practical experience in the area of conflict management, workplace violence prevention, and personal protection, and so much more. He is also the host of the very popular podcast called the Courage Wolf Podcast, which is about having a platform for people to share their stories of tough times and how they got through them. He is an amazing host, and I ought to know that because I was recently a guest on his show. It is episode 145, so if you want to go to the Courage Wolf Podcast, which I would highly recommend, and we'll send you the links in the show notes, and Terry will actually tell you how to find him. Check it out, and you're going to learn more about me than you ever wanted to know. So Terry, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the show.
Cheryl, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And that was quite the introduction. I've done hundreds of SWAT calls in my career and never, ever felt the pressure that I felt now from an introduction like that. So I hope I do you, and I hope I do your podcast justice in our podcast today.
I have all the confidence in the world that you will. So once again, thank you so much for being here. And like I said, and the audience now knows that you are incredibly humble.
Thank you. I try.
So tell us how you got into the specialty of personal protection. I mean, this is a highly specialized and a highly skilled and sometimes a little bit could be dangerous field to work in.
So I guess it's a somewhat long story. So you feel free to cut me off at the knees anywhere in the story if I run to 15, 20 minutes and stuff like that. So when I was in my 20s, I think 23, I found myself owning a company, a graphic arts company, and a commercial photography company. And I did that for 8 years until I was 31. And during that time, I was highly interested in the martial arts, different martial arts. I think I started with Taekwondo, went to karate, Wing Chun Kung Fu, the Filipino martial arts of arnis and eskrima, and a number of others as well, boxing, a little bit of jiu-jitsu. And I also competed very highly in a sport called IPSC, or International Practical Shooting Confederation, which was a practical shooting sport that had hostage targets and stuff like that, and had more of a self-defense bent, I guess, than other shooting sports. And I competed very highly in that for a number of years. And I found myself with the martial arts and with the shooting leaning towards policing, which is what I always wanted to do. And so, as you well know, the universe steps in, and it stepped in at a time with certain technologies that were going to place my business in a precarious position. And so I thought to myself, now's the time to do what you really wanted to do, which was to get into policing. And so I applied, and I got on within 3 months, and that started my policing career. And if I can tell your guests a little story about how I got on the police department, is that okay?
Oh, absolutely.
I don't know if I've told you this in our conversations, but back then, you had to go to your doctor for a physical, and your doctor would perform the eye test, which was essentially just reading off the eye chart. You had to have 20/30 vision uncorrected. So without glasses or without contact lenses, your vision had to be 20/30. And I don't know whether I'm going to get myself in trouble by saying this, but my right eye was 2150, and my left eye was 2300. So I knew that there was no way I was going to get on the police department, even though I knew that I would be a great candidate and a great police officer. So I thought, okay, how do we get around this? And I went out and I bought 6 eye charts and I memorized them. Different eye charts, memorized them. And I thought, okay, I've got this. So went to my doctor and did the physical. And he said, okay, the eye test, can you read this line? And I said, yeah, absolutely. And so I read that line and I got a little cocky. I wasn't humble back then, got a little cocky. And I said, I can read the line below that too, if you want. But sure. And so I read it and he said, you passed. And so there started my police career after that. And I became a sniper and all sorts of different things in policing. So that's how I
I
started.
love that story so much. I can't tell you how much I love it, because we have a saying in our martial arts school, just because we're ninjas and we like to be smart mouths. And we always say, if you're not cheating, you're not trying.
Absolutely.
So, no harm, no foul. And you got the job. And I love that story. You knew what you wanted and you knew how to get it. And, it was just a little bit sneaky. So I love that.
Good. That's absolutely it. You're absolutely right. I knew what I wanted and there was nothing going to stand in my way. And so I did what needed to be done
And
to get it done.
and the fact that you became a sniper, you have to have pretty good vision to be able to do that.
Well, yeah, and that was with corrections, obviously, with
Mm,
contacts or with glasses. I wore
mhm,
contacts my entire career, so I had perfect vision with contacts,
mhm.
and never had a problem. Never had a problem with the contacts.
So they never found out that, like, okay, this guy is now wearing contacts, but yet, gee, last week he had perfect vision. That never came up.
No, no, because all they were concerned about was that you passed the eye test with within those certain parameters, and then after that, you could wear glasses or contacts to correct up to 20/20 if you wanted to.
Okay, got it. All right. So that launched your career um, into law enforcement. So,
Yes.
uh, what happened then? How did you end up doing what you're doing now?
Well, I was lucky enough to, when I got on the department, to have the ear of certain people in the department because they they'd known about my martial arts career and they'd more specifically known about my shooting career. And so I forget the armorer or the firearms instructor at the time. I think it was Mac Heddle. He knew about me.
Mhm.
And when I came on, he said, oh, Terry, you know what? You're going to love it. We fire 250 rounds per year for training. And I said, Mac, you're kidding me, right? And he said, no. And I said, I fire 15,000 rounds a year in training. And 250 rounds a year for a police officer, that's criminal. And
Mhm.
so, as luck would have it, he listened to me. And so I managed to change police training for us. And then when I got onto the SWAT team, I managed to bring up our training to standards. And yeah, it could very easily have been shut down the other way. But
Wow.
I had the ear of someone who was into firearms and actually wanted to learn more relevant methods for police officers too. And so
Mhm.
that essentially launched my career in policing. After that, I was on the road for a number of years. Then I applied to get on the SWAT team. And in Canada, we call them emergency response units. So I applied to get on the SWAT team. And if memory serves me correctly, I believe there were 7 or 8 people trying out for 2 positions.
Mm.
And the 2 of us who got on, when we went through the physical testing, we did we did more than was necessary. You know that business acronym, under promise and over deliver.
Mhm.
We did the same thing. So let's say that push-ups, 100% was you did 40 of them.
Mhm.
So we would crank out the push-ups. And when we got to 40, the other 6 or 7 people dropped off and they said, okay, that's it. We've done 100%. And Rob and I went past 40, 50, 55, 60 until the tester said, okay, that's enough macho bullshit. And let's go on to the next test. And so that's what we did. We continued to do each test more than we needed to do. And lo and behold, the 2 of us
Mhm.
who got on the SWAT team were Rob and I, who did more than was necessary.
Mhm. Sometimes it pays not to be humble and to be an overachiever and just let that come through or come out.
Absolutely. You're
Mhm.
absolutely right. And then after that, I was on the team for, I believe, 4 years and lucky enough to be able to change all of our training into more realistic training. When I came off the team, I went up to the Ontario Police College and I taught up there for 2.5 years as a firearms instructor and as a
Mhm.
self-defense, personal protection, defensive tactics instructor. And that was a great experience. I was treated like gold at the Ontario
Mhm.
Police College. Um, After that, came back to my own department, worked on the road for 2 or 3 years, was asked to go into the training branch at our department, which I did for, I think, about 3 to 4 years until I had the unfortunate experience of having a new micromanager
Oh,
as a sergeant. And so,
got it.
it was terrible. It was a terrible experience. It was the only terrible experience I've ever had on the department. And so after a year of that experience, I asked out, went back on the road, and that's where I spent my entire career, which was on the road, which is what I love to do.
Mhm. That's an amazing story. And I just keep going back to, okay, that you're on the SWAT team and all the work that you've done. That's incredibly stressful. And I'm sure you've seen some pretty awful things in your career.
Hmm. Yeah, actually, I mean, it certainly can be. You're absolutely
Mhm.
right. It certainly can be incredibly stressful. However, I I don't know. I don't know whether this will make me sound strange. And if it does, that's okay. But it wasn't stressful for me.
Mhm.
It was what I wanted to do. And the other people who were on the team, it was what they wanted to do as well. And we were tested for that. And so our
Mhm.
personalities lent us to that type of a policing experience. And so I think because of that, we didn't we didn't experience the stress that a lot of police officers experience in their
Mhm.
careers.
Mhm.
Mind you, we saw bad things, we saw incredibly horrible things, but for me, I just dealt with them as soon as possible after the fact. And I've been lucky in that I've never had any ramifications, I guess, of
Mhm.
any of the things that I've seen. I've never had post-traumatic stress, anything like that. And I
Mhm.
consider I consider myself to be blessed because of that too.
That makes me wonder, do you think that your extensive background in martial arts training, which had gone on for years, helped you with that? Because that's one of the things that I know we work on is trying to remain, we call it our gaman, calm and just serene and, breathing through the tension and the stress and just trying to keep ourselves calm. So do you think that that training had influenced how you reacted on the job?
Oh, absolutely. The martial arts training, as you mentioned, teaches you how to perform under stress, how to keep yourself calm. So that really, really helped. And the different martial arts that I did as well, especially the martial arts of Arnis and Eskrima, where we started to learn how to use sticks and knives and stuff like that. That was incredibly helpful. Plus, too, I was into meditation, breathing exercises, and I always worked out consistently. So I
Mhm.
think that helped a lot in terms of stress. And along with the firearms, with me firing 15,000 rounds a year, I had great confidence in my skill with a gun. And in my police career, I think I logged in anywhere from 350 to 450 gunpoint arrests in
Wow.
my career, either as an officer on the street or as part of a team member. And yeah, I think it was my experience with the shooting competitions and the number of rounds that I fired per year that gave me great confidence in my skill with firearms. As a matter of fact, I couldn't believe it when I first got on the department. I remember going to a call with a training officer as a recruit and seeing another officer perform a gunpoint arrest. And I know your listeners won't see this, but when they brought their gun out of the holster and brought it forward, they
Mhm.
were jerking. They were trembling like this.
Oh, geez.
And this was a person who'd been on 10 years and was highly respected. And I thought to myself, oh my goodness. And I believe quite strongly that the more you practice something, the better you
Mhm.
get at it. and the more that you're able to handle the stress of that event. And from your own training in the martial arts, that you're better able to handle the stress of a real event or even an event within your art as well. And so yeah, I think all of the training that I did up until that point, and including the training that I continued to do, probably helped alleviate a lot of the stress that may have been involved in any particular call.
And I keep smiling every time you say Eskrima, because I just experienced it for the first time
Oh, you
about a
did?
month ago. Yes,
Oh,
we do weapons on Saturday at the dojo, but I usually opt out for weapons just because I have another class that I want to take someplace else. But when I heard it was Eskrima, I thought, I really want to try this. Oh my gosh, it is. So I've done probably 4 or 5 classes so far. It is so much fun. I can't stand it. It is so much fun that I have dropped my dance class on Saturday so I
oh,
can
wow.
go to the Eskrima. Yes, that's saying an awful lot
Good for
because it
you.
is just that much fun and learning so much more. I mean, when you're doing martial arts, there's no limit of learning. I mean, you never get to, people say, well, you're a black belt, why are you going to class? You know, why are you training still? You've reached the pinnacle. And that's not true. There's always so much more to learn and so much
Right.
more to improve your awareness, and physical, mental, emotional, spiritual growth is just incredible.
Oh, I agree entirely. And there is no pinnacle in the martial arts. There is no pinnacle in life, is there?
Well, there isn't, but some people kind of think there is.
Yeah, I know. I know.
And that's sad.
So can I ask you a question?
Sure. Yeah.
How did you get involved in Eskrima?
It was actually one of our students who was taking NIMPO, and I hadn't even seen him in years, but I knew him from several years ago training, and he was such a quiet person. When he was in class with us, I'd be like, does he even speak? I mean, this guy was just so, is he really all there, you know?
Right.
And then, you know, so I hadn't seen him for several years. And then I get this email that this guy's coming to teach us, you know, Eskrima. And I'm going, is this the same guy? Because how's he going to teach a class? Because he never even talks.
Right.
So, you know, with great trepidation, I went to the first class after I bought my sticks and not knowing what to expect. This guy is amazing. He is phenomenal. He's a phenomenal teacher. He is hilarious. He's, you know, funny and very energetic. And I'm going, wow, what happened to you? So I guess that in NIMPO, that wasn't his comfort zone. You know, that wasn't his first place of where he felt, you know, he was comfortable, or he fit in.
Right.
So he was actually training and doing Eskrima at the same time he was studying some NIMPO. So he was trying to apply the NIMPO to the Eskrima and vice versa. And he's got it figured out, but it was really, really fun. So he was somebody who was associated with our dojo, and, you know, he agreed to teach. I think he's going to teach for about 12 weeks.
Fantastic.
Which of course isn't that long to, you know, be able to learn something like that. But
oh, you're going to love it.
Oh, I do love it. It's so fun. But we had to have a talk with him of, okay, you're teaching at this level and we're down here at the you know, step 1.
Right.
How do we have 2 sticks in our hands and move them without smacking ourselves in the head?
Yes. Yes. And I don't know if you can see it, but your listeners can't see it, but there's a bump just above my right elbow. It's a bone spur, I guess. And that's from me hitting myself in the head with one of the double sticks. I was training, I forget the exercise. I was training with a partner, and he was a world-class stick fighter. And I got same thing. I got a little cocky, and maybe where this is, where the humbleness has come from, but I got a little cocky and I started to move the sticks a little bit faster and a little bit more aggressively. And he responded in kind. One of my sticks rebounded off of his, came back and smacked me right here, and gave me this permanent example of how you should be humble.
Oh, so that's why you have so much humility. You wear it, you know, as a, you know, what, banner of or badge of honor.
Right. Right.
Well, you're go ahead.
You're going to enjoy the Eskrima. It really is a lot of fun. I think, to tell you the truth, I think that is the most interesting and fun martial art I've ever trained in. I
Mhm.
especially love the sticks, but I especially love the knife stuff too. And as a matter of fact, I became known as the knife guy on the department because
Wow.
I taught knife defense stuff in use of force, very simple stuff. But I also carried 3 knives on duty.
Oh,
And I still carry 1 or 2 when I go out to a social function.
well, yeah, doesn't everybody?
I do. And it has to, the color has to, doesn't, it can't clash with your outfit. So I have
Oh, no.
different knives, different colors.
Yeah. Yeah. It can't clash with your hair color either. I've learned that one. Yeah. Well, I have never had anything as dramatic as that with the getting hit in the head. But if you can see directly above my head, you can see that there's like 2 bow staffs together
Mhm.
on my weapons rack. It's actually a what we call a rikshako bow, a 6-foot long bow staff that now is 2 3-foot long staffs with very pointy ends.
Yeah.
And that happened when my partner was coming at me we were doing this, movement pattern, and it
Mhm.
ended in like a kill shot over the head, top of the head. And this was the only other woman that my sensei ever had, made it to the level of black belt. So we were black
Mhm.
belts together. And she was a vicious little thing, a lot of fun, but a vicious little thing. She's in the book. You read about her.
Yes, yes, I did.
Yes. And so she was building, as I was defending myself, she was the attacker. And as she was going through the pattern, you could just see her spirit rising, and her intention and her strength and her power and speed was just building as she was going. And when she came in for that final headshot, and all I could think of is, oh my God, she's going to kill me. And I responded by just blocking as hard as I could with my stick. And this sound like a cannon went off through the dojo, and everybody stopped what they were doing. And I'm just looking around going, something's weird here. Why am I holding 2 sticks?
Oh,
And my partner is just looking at me with her eyes really big. And I thought, that could have been my head.
yes. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So that's the
Wow.
last time I played sticks with her. So
That's a great story.
yeah. But yeah, martial arts, you have all kind of fun stories. Although
Oh,
I
yeah.
did break her foot one time, but you know that story too.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't me.
Well, if you get a chance, I don't want to hijack your podcast, but if you get a chance and you want to take a look at a group that
Mhm,
trains in Eskrima
mhm,
realistically, they're
mhm.
called the Dog Brothers out of California.
Okay.
And their motto is higher consciousness through harder contact.
Whoa, they sound
It,
like someone I really would not like to train with, but I would love to watch.
if you get a chance to take a look at that, let me
Okay.
know what you think.
And for my listeners, you probably think we're crazy, but there is a whole different culture when it comes to martial arts and even in self-defense. And when I first started training, a lot of times I was horrified by the conversations that the guys would have at the dojo. But then all of a sudden it was like, oh my goodness, this is real life stuff, and it's
Mhm.
very practical. And that just brings the subject back to you with your practical training. Do you work with women? Do you train self-defense or teach self-defense classes?
Yes. I started teaching self-defense personal protection classes about 8 years before I retired. I've been
Mhm.
retired for 8 years now, so about 16 years ago. And I started with a request from a staff sergeant in the department who asked if I could train a company. And I did. I trained a company in Toronto, about 60 people, 2-day seminar, and they loved it. And so that just kept snowballing. I kept
Mhm.
getting asked by different companies to train. But I also had a course going at the time where I trained personal protection, self-defense strategies, and physical skills to women primarily. And so, but I found with that course that while it was a great course, I gravitated towards more of the corporate stuff
Mhm.
because I don't know if you've ever tried to set up a course with 20 individuals, male or female. But
Uh-huh.
as you get closer to the course, people say, oh, you know what? I've got to wash my car that weekend. I have to
Mhm.
walk the dog. So I morphed more into the corporate field. And
Mhm.
I now do personal protection and workplace violence seminars for corporations who have had violent acts happen or
Mhm.
who are anticipating having violent acts happen. And I would say that 60 to 70% of the participants in those courses are women. So
Mhm.
yes, I guess I essentially teach the majority. The majority of students that I teach are women.
I find that very intriguing, just the entire subject of workplace violence, because this isn't really something that we worried about or thought about 20 years ago, or maybe I'm just naive and never heard about it. But
Mhm.
it seems to be becoming more and more prevalent in our society.
Oh,
So
you're
is
absolutely,
that what you're experiencing?
yeah, you're absolutely right. And with the advent of the pandemic, I think it's become even more prevalent too.
Hmm.
And so, as I mentioned, I train organizations that have had a violent act happen,
Mm.
or again, or are anticipating having violent acts happen. I don't train, well, let me go back a bit. I train body language skills, I train verbal de-escalation skills, I train being awareness skills, obviously, and I train realistic physical skills. I don't train people in the legislation part of it. I train them in the legalities of using force,
Hmm.
but not about the legislation. And oh, what was I going to say? I don't train people how to report that they've been assaulted.
Yes.
I I train people how to prevent being assaulted,
Hmm.
and if they can't prevent it, how to deal with it safely and
Hmm.
practically so that they get themselves back to their family. And I think you mentioned it in our podcast too. Your tenant in the martial arts is to deflect or diffuse,
E-
deflect, and redirect. Correct?
evade,
Evade,
deflect, and
deflect,
redirect.
redirect.
Hmm.
Exactly. Exactly. And so that's what we teach too. We teach
Hmm.
people to evade if they can. And if they
Hmm.
can't, then to deflect, redirect, and handle it if they can't
Hmm.
do any of those.
And if I might add that even before, there's something that comes before evade. And that's exactly what you're teaching with the awareness to be
Hmm.
able to sense body language, to pick up on cues where a situation might or has the potential of getting out of hand or might become violent so you can stop it before it gets to that point.
Right. Right. You're absolutely right. And a great example of that happened yesterday. I was out mountain biking, a beautiful mountain bike area around Hamilton called Dundas Conservation Area. It was a holiday up here, so there are a lot of people.
Mhm.
And it became, it's always apparent to me, but it became apparent on this mountain bike ride that most people have no awareness skills whatsoever. They don't look past 2 feet ahead of them. And a really great example of that is I was coming up the final hill to get to the path to go home, coming up this final hill, and I'm grinding up this hill, starting to grind up this hill. And about 20 feet ahead of me, there's a horse and a rider. And about 15 feet, 20 feet ahead of him, there's a group of people walking along. And all of a sudden, one of the group turned around and she was totally startled by this huge animal that was there. And she said to the guy, I didn't even know you were there. And I thought to myself, well, there's a perfect example right there.
Right.
How can you not be aware that a 1,600-pound animal is walking up behind you? And it was only because she had her nose stuck in her phone and
Oh,
walking along in this beautiful nature area with her nose stuck in her
yeah.
phone and not even looking around. And so, as you well know, awareness, the in its most basic, is just looking around and
Mhm.
seeing what's behind you, seeing what's in front of you, just being aware of your environment.
So I have a couple of things to say about that. Number one, did you give her your card? Uh,
No, I was just hanging onto the bike for dear life, trying to get up that last hill.
oh, I see. Okay. Number two, even if your face is in your phone, I would imagine that you could smell a horse. I mean, I have a very sensitive sense of smell, or
Hmm,
let's just say acute. And I love the smell of a horse. Oh my gosh. I wish
yes,
somebody would bottle it and sell it as a perfume because I would buy it. I just love the way a horse smells. And I'm not really a horse person. You know, I've come across them hiking because I pay attention to the trail and people around me and horses.
right.
And I just absolutely love them. There's something so magnificent about them, and they're such sensitive creatures. And I can guarantee that horse knew that woman was there
Oh, for sure.
and wasn't paying attention. So that's just
Absolutely.
rule number one is put your phone away.
Just take a look around every once in a while. And it's funny, you were talking about bottling the scent of a horse if you could.
Mhm,
I'm dating myself a little bit. So Roy Rogers' horse, way back
mhm,
5,000 years ago, was named Trigger. So what will we
mhm.
call it? Would we call it Ode to Trigger?
Oh, to trigger. I guess so. I don't know. And there was when I was taking my doing some prerequisite classes before I got into physical therapy school. And so I was in a lot of classes with pre-med, pre-vet, pre-pharmacy, and of course pre-PT, all of us together. And we all got to be pretty good friends, especially if we weren't competing for the same spots in the same industry or the
Mhm.
same profession. And I got to be really good friends with this guy who was desperate to get into vet school because he loved animals so much and he loved horses so much. He just wanted to be a large animal vet. And he said that the one thing he loved more than anything else was the smell of manure. And, horse dung to him was just, it was just wonderful and beautiful.
Did he realize his dream, I hope?
I think he did. Yeah. The
Good.
last I heard, he was well on his way to getting into vet school. His in-laws were horrified, but oh well.
That's
Sometimes you
true.
just have to follow your passion and follow what you love to do. So
Absolutely.
that's another thing that you have, another one of your passions, and that is art and photography. And you sent me some of your photography, and it is absolutely beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I looked through the emails that we had sent back and forth prior to doing
Mhm,
uh, your podcast with me. And I noticed that I'd sent you some of the photographs that I've done. And thank
mhm,
you very much.
mhm,
I used to be, before I became a police officer, I was a commercial photographer and graphic artist. And I would do mostly commercial stuff.
mhm,
Um, and so I would say about 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, in retirement, I still had my training company and still do. And I started to look around at different works of different photographers,
mhm.
thinking that I might want to get back into it. And I looked around, Cheryl, and I try not to speak bad of anybody, but there is so much terrible photography out there
Yeah.
that I thought I can do this. I can do this again. So I got back into it, found, um, oh, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not venue, but found a genre, I guess, of
Mhm,
photography. And so I started to learn how to do that. And so what I do now primarily is I do sports pictures
mhm,
of children, kids, all the way up to 16, 17, 18. And I do dance photographs
mhm,
as well. You've seen one of those as
mhm,
well. And I put, I do them graphically and artistically, I think. And
mhm,
I think they're somewhat different than most of the dance and sports photographs that you see out there.
mhm.
Yeah.
Especially the dance ones. They were absolutely beautiful. And it's very difficult to capture the essence of movement in a still photo. And I
Hmm.
think that you really did a great job of that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. I really do.
And I don't know why I wrote down humility again as I was taking notes because it was, oh, that's what it was. Yeah, there was that humility that came back out again when you were looking at the other photography and you're going, I could do better than that. So there you go.
Yes. Yes. Well, actually, one of the other things I used to do, if we can,
Mhm,
is years and years ago, I went out to buy, it was either a buffet or a coffee table. And
mhm.
I looked at the workmanship and I thought, this is terrible. And so I started into woodworking. And so I did woodworking for about 20 years and built coffee
Really?
tables. Yeah, I did a whole bunch of different things. So
Did you do any weapons?
no, I would have liked to. Well,
Uh-huh.
if you can call pens a weapon, and you can.
Well, you can.
Yeah, I used to
Yeah.
turn pens with exotic woods. And
Wow.
but no, I didn't do any weapons. So that's something that I would have liked to have done.
Yeah,
But
well, that's interesting. I had this conversation with a young man who was at the dojo yesterday. He's one of our students, and we've gotten to have a pretty good friendship going on. And he was showing me, like his tanbo, and it was beautiful. And I kept turning it in my hands. He says, "This is absolutely beautiful. Where did you get this?" And he said, "I made it." And I'm like, "Get out!" And he says, "Yeah." And then he showed me his hanbo, and I looked at him and I said, "You know what, Tristan? If you could make me a Rakshako bow, because of course right now I don't have one, it's in two pieces with the
Hmm.
pointy ends. And if you could make it out of this wood, I would love it. I would pay you. So he's on a mission to find a piece of wood that long so he can make me a new Rakshako bow.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So
Mhm.
you'll have a piece of art to hang in your girl cave.
Yes. Oh, you can never have too many things to hang in the girl cave.
No.
But let me ask you this, because I find the woodworking fascinating too. My dad was a builder. He wasn't a carpenter, but he did do some, like woodwork. But he built the house that I grew up in,
Well,
and laid the stone. I mean, he's an incredible stonemason. But there's something about working with your hands that is so gratifying and therapeutic and almost poetic at the same time.
hmm, yes.
So just when you have a hunk of wood and you're working with it, like what goes through your mind and the sensations that go through you. And now I sound like my editor who always says, what was going through you at the time this was happening? It's like, oh, I don't have feelings. Don't talk. Don't ask.
Well,
Anyhow.
that, that's funny because you and I are quite alike because my partner, Kristen, who is a yoga therapy instructor or becoming a yoga therapy instructor,
Ah,
she always talks to me about, so what did you feel about that? How did you feel
mm,
about that?
mm,
And I'll say, honey, I don't know. I
mhm.
didn't feel anything about it. So I'm quite the same as you. I don't have feelings.
Yes.
I
And I'm
do.
not going to talk about them if I did.
Yeah, yeah,
There we
true.
go.
I do have feelings actually. They come out during when I watch the movie Field of Dreams. And
Oh,
lately they come out. We've been watching Grey's Anatomy, and I've been bawling my eyes out at some of the episodes of Grey's Anatomy. I can't
oh,
believe it.
wow. Wow. See, you do have feelings. I'm the Ice Maiden.
Yeah, I do have a little bit of feelings, but in woodworking, what intrigued me the most was the grain of the wood, the beauty of the
Mm.
wood. And so if I could, I did turning. I did turning with a lathe. I crafted coffee tables, clocks, etc. And so I really loved to see the finished product and how you could bring out the original beautiful grain in that wood.
Mhm.
And I got out of woodworking because I was attacked by a lathe.
Oh,
And this, I guess you could consider this part of the humble journey as well. I had a workshop and I put a 3 inch by 3 inch hunk of maple on there, about 36 inches long, to turn a baseball bat. And big floor lathe. And all of a sudden, the lathe started to shimmy a little bit. So I stopped it, checked everything, checked to make sure everything was okay, and did it again, turned it on again. It started to shimmy again, checked it one more time. I turned it on, it started to shimmy. And just before I could go to turn it off, this uh, 3 inch by 3 inch by 36 inch hunk of maple, turning at about
oh,
3,400 revolutions per minute, flew off the lathe and hit me in the face.
oh my goodness. Jeez.
And I remember hitting the ground and thinking, reaching up and thinking, oh, everything's wet and everything's red. And this is probably not a good thing. So went back to the house, looked in the mirror and thought, you know what, could be far worse, and drove myself to the hospital. And the doctor who was there, he actually said, I told him what happened. He said, I'm a wood turner as well. And you had you had the lathe set for too many revolutions per minute.
Oh,
And it was the centrifugal force of too many RPMs that ripped this piece of wood out of the lathe. And
oh.
so, so life is about lessons, right? Life
Well,
is,
yeah, and that's a big one. Sometimes, and I always say this, it's like sometimes you have to have that proverbial 2x4 across the head to really get your
mhm.
attention. So I guess you did have that, more
Oh,
or less.
absolutely. And I only sustained a minor injury, and it was in the upper lip. And I
So
had
it
to,
didn't break your cheekbone or anything.
no, nothing. I was
Wow.
so totally lucky. Sustained this minor injury. And the only real injury to my ego was that I had to
Mm.
shave off half of my mustache. And I thought, do I really want to do this? No, I like it. And I thought, oh, but can I go through life with only half of a mustache? And so I think it was a couple bottles of wine later that I got out the razor and took the mustache off, and it eventually grew back over the years. So
Mhm.
life teaches us a lot of things.
Yes, it does. It teaches us a lot of humility along the way, doesn't it?
Yes.
God, that's too funny. Oh, well, anyhow, except for that story about the woodworking, I just think that the woodworking is an incredible journey. So, but I can see how that would end it.
Yeah. Yeah. I still love it though. I'd love to get back to it.
Yeah, well, maybe it's time. Yeah, maybe it's time. You never know. I love the smell of sawdust
Oh yeah.
because I
Mhm.
mean, again, I've never worked with wood and probably never will. But that brings me back to my childhood is that we moved into the house as soon as it was livable, but my father was still working on it, well, for like years, 20 years later, he was still working and changing things and rebuilding things in the inside of the house. So he actually came out one summer and spent about a week or so with us here, and he was helping my husband, who doesn't build at all, but he takes directions pretty well. And so they actually finished the basement for me, not knowing that years later I would, be so grateful because this has turned in my girl cave has turned into my recording studio, my ballet
Nice.
studio, and yeah, a lot of other things too. So I
Very
smell
nice.
that, I smell sawdust and I just remember my dad building.
Nice memory.
Yep. Yep. And so one more thing I just wanted to say about the photography though, you had a wonderful picture too of your grandson.
Oh yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
It,
In his hockey
yeah,
uniform.
it's hockey. My grandson is 12 years old now. He's a goalie for Hamilton Huskies AAA novice team, and
Nice.
got him in the studio one day, and we just took some incredible photographs and managed to merge them with some incredible graphics of ice and hockey pucks and stuff like that. So yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah. And then let's talk about your podcast. How did that come about? What made you decide to start a podcast? Because, sometimes it can be a little overwhelming and it's a lot of work. So how'd that come about?
I would say just when the pandemic hit, I thought to myself, the training company is going to be impacted by COVID.
Mhm.
And mind you, it wasn't dire for me because it's a part-time training company and
Mhm.
I really don't need to do it. I just love to do it. And I thought, what else can I do? So people have been telling me for years that I should do a podcast, that I've got the voice for a podcast.
You certainly do.
Oh, thank you. And I've even had some well-meaning friends who are not friends anymore tell me that I had a face for radio as well.
Mhm. Mhm.
so I did a very intensive business exercise and drilled down, and it kept coming back podcast. And so I thought there's so the whole premise of the podcast is there's an old tale about two wolves that live inside each of us, the fear wolf and the courage wolf.
Mhm.
And the one that we feed the most is the one that gets most powerful. And so I thought, I'll call it the courage wolf. And shortly after that, I thought, there's no way that the name the courage wolf could not be taken yet on any of the domain um, websites or anything like that. And lo and behold, when I went on a domain website, thecouragewolf.com was available, thecouragewolf.ca. And so I thought, oh, this is meant to be.
Mhm.
So the whole premise of the podcast is we speak weekly with guests who have gone through trials, challenges, adversity, and we ask them how they got through it. And their experiences teach the rest of us how we can get through our own challenges and adversity because we all go through it. And I was lucky enough to have you on the podcast just a couple of weeks ago, and it was and for your listeners, it was a fantastic podcast. If you get a chance to listen to it, by all means, it was one of the longer podcasts that we've done, but there was so much great information there, and you, Shell, are such a great guest that I really didn't think I could tell your story or give your story justice by just a 40-minute podcast. So it went to about 75 minutes, and it doesn't seem that long at all, does it?
No, it doesn't, because I thought, oh, I wonder if I can even stand listening to myself for 75 minutes. But you are such an incredible host. And for my listeners, we talked about a lot of really sensitive topics and sensitive subjects. And the way, you made me feel so comfortable that it was, like it wasn't that difficult to just, get it out there. So thank you
Mhm.
for that.
No, thank you. And so we've we've got about 145 episodes out now. You were the 145th. We've interviewed civilians who have gone through challenging times like yourself, cancer survivors as well. And we interview first responders, paramedics, police officers, firefighters, military. And we also include in the mix conversations with psychotherapists, healers. We had someone on the podcast not too long ago who was, he's a world-renowned psychotherapist who's actually healing post-traumatic stress
Oh, wow.
in 4 hours.
Oh, my goodness. Oh,
I
my
know.
gosh.
I know. And so we've had some incredible guests on the show, yourself included. It's gone very well. I certainly go through a process as you do with your podcast. Podcasting is not easy, is it? There's a lot of work that has to be put into it.
There's an awful lot of work that goes into it, and a lot of time and effort and energy. But it's worth it because of the people that you meet. I mean,
Yes.
through this process, meeting you, you are number, I think 184 or 185 for me. So, I learned something with every person that I talk to, and it really just makes me feel good that I can bring this out to my audience and just have it out there. And maybe, this episode with you, maybe someone, comes across it a year from now. And it's like, I really needed to hear that at this point in time. So just getting it out there it's so rewarding, but yes, it's an awful lot of effort, and promoting it is the same thing as like promoting your book. When you write a book and you have to promote that. So it's a lot of work, but it's definitely a labor of love. And for what I personally get out of it as a host, it's worth the effort. There are times when it's like, okay, I just need a few days to let it go for a while, but
Yeah, absolutely. It is worth the effort. And thank you for your nice comments about my podcast. I've listened to a few of yours and they're fantastic, and you've had great success with it, and your book as well. But you're right. I mean, finding out about what your guests have gone through and their journeys enriches our lives too as hosts. I because of the experiences that I've had with my guests, I'm 100% certain that I don't react the same way in different circumstances. I've learned. And so, yeah, I think it's as much an experience for us as the host as it is for our guests.
Absolutely.
And
So
if I can,
go
if I can
ahead.
promote the podcast for just a second, I just found out this.
Absolutely.
Cheryl
Go for it.
became the newest member of our private Facebook group, the Courage Wolf, just yesterday. Thank you. And just yesterday, I came across a podcast analytic company that I found out about, and supposedly we're in the top 5% of all podcasts in the world now.
I saw that. It was very exciting.
It was very exciting. Yeah.
Were you shocked?
Yeah, I was a little bit shocked, but then I thought to myself, okay, there are 2,800,000 podcasts. And so if we're in the top 5%, we're in the top 140,000, which is okay. Hopefully we're closer to the top 100 than the top 139,000. But yeah, I was shocked, pleasantly surprised by that too.
Yeah, because podcast statistics and finding them are a little bit challenging and trying to figure them out and stuff. So, well, good for you and congratulations. So everybody do go to the Courage Wolf podcast and check him out. And you do have some incredible guests. I was scrolling down and thought if I had a lot more time, I'd do this before the show, but I couldn't listen to them all.
Thank you.
How else could people get a hold of you?
The podcast is on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and at our website, all our episodes are at thecouragewolf.com. People can get a hold of me. My email address is terryoliver@rogers.com or terry@thecouragewolf.com. And if people want to explore the possibility of doing seminars on personal protection, workplace violence prevention, and preparation, our website for that is conflictmanagementassociates.com.
Okay. And I will have all of that in the show notes as well.
Thank you.
So what little tips could you leave with our listeners? And I always just zero on the same thing, and that's awareness. How can our listeners, what steps can they take to keep themselves as safe as possible in a world that sometimes seems like it's a little bit bonkers and everybody's
Mhm,
going crazy?
mhm. Well, awareness skills are huge, obviously. Without awareness skills, nothing else works. But we have to, as you well know, we have to have some realistic skills to back up those awareness skills. And I think it starts with, mindset,
Mhm,
because I know a lot of very high level martial artists who don't have the proper mindset, who wouldn't be able to take their incredible techniques into a real fight and be able to do it. And
mhm,
then again, I know some people who have no skills whatsoever in the physical
mhm,
realm, but their mind is set properly for safety and for survival. And so I think where it starts after awareness is mindset. And I think you really have to determine why you would want to prevail in a physical altercation if it comes to that. And for most of us, it comes down to self preservation. And then after that, family, friends. You don't want somebody to injure you, to take your lifestyle away from you. So I think the next level up is mindset.
mhm,
And after that, it becomes a question of managing your state, managing your emotional state in a conflict or a physical confrontation. And that comes from a number of things. You know this in the martial arts, practicing.
mhm,
We, by practicing our physical skills,
mhm,
we also miraculously are able to control our emotional state as well.
mhm.
And there was something else that I was going to say. And I think because of my slightly advanced age, it's just gone now. And it'll come back. It'll come back in about 30 seconds. You'll edit that out, I suppose.
Well, or it might come back or 3 o'clock in the morning, which is usually when mine come popping back into my head at 3 a.m. And it's like, oh, I need to text that person and tell them what. And it's like, no, just let it go, leave it. So the other thing I do want to bring up is, as you were talking about how people can find you or get a hold of you, you also have a newsletter that you put out.
Yes, and that's at thecouragewolf.com, the website. Just scroll down to the bottom of the page, put in your email address, and we won't inundate you with emails every week. We'll send you one email a week when the new episode comes out. And as we go along, we might send you one or two more per month telling you about some of the new things that are happening. So yeah,
Mm.
please, if you get a chance, go to thecouragewolf.com, scroll down to the bottom of the page, put in your email address, and I promise I won't send you too many.
He won't, trust me, because I signed up for his newsletter, and it's actually very nice to get that weekly. Hey, look at what we just recorded. So let
Thank
me
you.
see. Going back, and now I just lost it. There was something else that I wanted to bring up. I guess that was the newsletter.
Okay. Actually, there's something else I wouldn't mind talking about if that's okay.
Yes.
Okay. Along the
Go for
line
it.
of state management. So managing
Yep.
your emotional state so that you're able
Hmm.
to stay in control during a physical action. There's also something called state access. And that
Hmm.
is where you have to be able to access the part of you that's ready to do violence in preservation of your own life. And because of our culture, that has been mostly bred out of us.
Hmm.
And so you have to be able to come up with almost like an alter ego that you can switch on in those rare cases of extreme violence that will protect you. Without that alter ego, most of us are humble. Most of us
Hmm.
are, we just want to go on with our daily lives, but you have to be able to access that part of you that can handle that physical altercation. And then after that, you take that part of you, put it way back in the back of your head, lock it away, chain it up so that it doesn't reappear until the next time. So I think that's very important for people to understand too, is you have to have that part of you that is able to come out when you need it. We want to escape and evade, but when we can't, we have to be able to access that part of us that will help us prevail so that we can go back to our families.
Thank you for bringing that up, because that is really important and people don't want to think about that.
Mhm.
But if it comes down to it's either you or them, you have to understand. You have to understand what you can do to protect yourself and what are you willing to do to protect yourself. If it came down to making that choice, it's either him or me.
Absolutely. And
And it
that's
takes you, it's a scary thing. And you might need some help with it. And that's why we have people like you who help, teach the self-protection. But if you can't protect yourself, you can't protect the people you love either.
absolutely. And that's part of the course too, is we teach you how to access that part of yourself that will help you prevail.
Mhm. Now I remembered what it was that I wanted to ask
Okay.
you too. You do have some books that you recommend for the people in your training. One of them is sitting right here next to me that I pick up all the time, and that is The Gift of Fear by Gavin de Becker. So do you want to talk about that? And then there were two others that I forgot about. I forgot their
Yeah.
names.
That's a fantastic book. And in any of the courses that I do, whether it's for private colleges or whether it's for organizations, I always recommend 3 books, especially if I'm training an organization that has had violent acts happen.
Mm.
And one of them that you have is called The Gift of Fear by Gavin de Becker. And Gavin de Becker is one of the world's foremost authorities on the prediction of violent behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a book that I believe everyone should have.
Mm-hmm.
And after reading it, and learning the lessons in this book, should pass it on to someone that they love. So I always recommend this book. And right on the front of the book, it says this book can save your life.
Mm-hmm.
Survival signals that protect us from violence.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a fantastic book. The other book that I recommend in courses, and you have to understand, I teach organizations that have had violent acts happen,
Mm-hmm.
which is quite different than an organization who just wants to learn how to report something or de-escalate something.
Mm-hmm.
We teach de-escalation skills as well. But the second book is called When Violence is the Answer, Learning How to Do What It Takes When Your Life is at Stake. And it's by Tim Larkin, who passed everything to become a Navy SEAL. And then in the final 2 weeks of his course, he had a disastrous underwater event where his eardrum burst. And so anyhow, he morphed, couldn't be a Navy SEAL, morphed into the intelligence community, and then went out on his own. And he teaches about extreme violence. So this is a book that everyone needs to have. The third book that I recommend to my students is called Violence of Mind by Varg Freeborn. And it's written by a criminal. It's written by a guy who was in jail for manslaughter.
Wow.
And this is a person who understands violence to the point whereas most of us do not. Even most police officers, most military do not understand violence to this point. And getting to the fourth book that I recommend to my students, and this book is new on my list of recommended books. It's called The Reluctant Ninja, How a Middle-Aged Princess Became a Warrior Queen by Cheryl Ilove.
Oh, you're so sweet. Thank you so much, Terry.
What a great book. I couldn't put it down.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate it. It's quite a ride, isn't it?
Oh, it is. Yeah. Yeah.
It's quite a, yeah. I hate to use the word emotion, but it's an emotional roller coaster.
Well, thank you for sending it to me. I appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for the recommendation. Thank you for being on the show. And I love talking to you, Terry. This is probably the third time we've had an extensively long conversation, and I really thoroughly enjoyed it. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much, Cheryl. And I hope your listeners got something out of our talk together. It was an honor to be on your show.
Oh, I'm sure they did. There's plenty of pearls of wisdom that's intertwined into this episode. So thank you so much. Everybody, thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. And, if there's one major takeaway from this episode, I could never say it enough, is self-awareness. Please be aware of your surroundings. Put the phone down. Check out the books that Terry recommended. Because especially The Gift of Fear, I have it. It's sitting right beside me. I pick it up and I read it every couple of days. I'll just read a couple of paragraphs just to remember that the signs are always there. And you just have to be aware and pay attention so you can see them to keep yourself safe. And that is the way of the FemiNinja.